Great. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for our information session on Stoneleigh's Emerging Leader Fellowship program. We're really honored and grateful that you're here with us and that you're interested in learning more about this opportunity for your organization. My name is Anne-Marie McGrory. I'm the Director of Communications at the Stoneleigh Foundation, and I'm joined by my colleague, Marie Williams, who is Deputy Director of the Foundation. Our hope is today that today will be an opportunity for you to, one, learn a little bit more about the Stoneleigh Foundation for those who aren't familiar, two, to get a better understanding of the Emerging Leader Fellowship program and to determine whether it's a good fit for your organization, and if so, how to apply. And three, most importantly, to hear about why we've chosen to dedicate this next cohort of fellows to focus on a common theme and objective, which, as you can see on the screen, is addressing Philadelphia's gun violence epidemic. And in light of this focus, at the start of today's meeting, we just wanted to take a brief moment of silence to acknowledge and think about and remember the more than 1,850 people who have experienced firearm violence in Philadelphia this year, both non-fatal and fatal shootings. So if you can just join me in a brief moment of silence. Thank you. So before we get into our presentation, I just wanted to share a couple of logistical details to hopefully make your viewing experience the best today. So we encourage you to look at the top of your Zoom window and select the View Options tab there, and you can click on the side-by-side mode so that you can see us a little bit better alongside the presentation. During the presentation, we encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Marie or I will address your question either in real time or we'll answer it at the end during the Q&A session, for which we'll have ample time. And please do include your name and organization so that we can identify you. And finally, in case you're concerned about missing anything today, or if you'd like to share this presentation with your colleagues or peers, we will be recording it and sharing it in a follow-up message. So with that, we'll get started. There we go. So here is the plan for this afternoon. First, we'll provide a brief overview of Stoneleigh and the Emerging Leader Fellowship program, where we'll highlight fellowship basics, some supports that Stoneleigh offers, and expectations that we have for host organizations. And then next, we'll talk a little bit about why we've decided to focus this upcoming cohort of Emerging Leader Fellows exclusively on the issue of gun violence in Philadelphia. We'll share a few types of projects that we are potentially seeking. And then finally, we'll review the application process and some upcoming deadlines. And as I said, we'll leave ample time at the end for any questions that you may have. So a little bit about the Stoneleigh Foundation to get started. Stoneleigh was founded 16 years ago by John and Cara Haas with the mission to improve the life outcomes of Philadelphia's young people. And our founders really believed that individuals have the power to affect social change, especially when they're given time to step back from their day-to-day job responsibilities. And so as a result, Stoneleigh has developed a somewhat unique funding strategy, which is that we invest in people and not programs. And we do so via two fellowship programs, which you can see here. The first is the Stoneleigh Fellowship, which is for more seasoned policymakers, practitioners, researchers, advocates, communicators who design and execute multi-year projects largely independently. The second type of fellowship, which is the one we are focused on today, is for earlier career professionals who are embedded within host organizations, and that, of course, is the Emerging Leader Fellowship. Both types of fellowships undertake projects that enhance how systems work together, improve policy and practice, generate new knowledge through action-oriented research, or address challenges that sort of cut across systems and issues, but affect young people in Philadelphia. So a little bit about our priorities. Historically, the bulk of our fellows have worked to address issues facing youth who are involved with or have the potential involvement with the youth justice and the child welfare system. But over the years, we've become increasingly interested in and invested in cross-systems and cross-issues work, including projects related to school discipline, truancy, physical and behavioral health, housing, and a myriad of other issues that are critical for young people's ability to successfully transition to adulthood. This year, as I've previously alluded, we are seeking project proposals that specifically seek to address gun violence in Philadelphia from a policy, practice, research, advocacy, organizing, or communications lens. And when I turn it over to Marie momentarily, she'll discuss that focus area in greater depth. So lastly, a brief note about our approach at the Stoneleigh Foundation. Since our founding, we have awarded more than 70 fellowships, including 45 Emerging Leader Fellowships. And our fellows really come from diverse educational and professional backgrounds, including law, social work, medicine, public administration, education, and organizing. We work closely with them to strengthen their connections with one another and provide ongoing opportunities for learning and professional development. And we've seen countless examples over the years of our fellows collaborating with one another in ways that both strengthen their project work, build the field in which they are working, and then also build up their professional networks in Philadelphia and nationally. So with that, I'll just get into some details about the Emerging Leader Fellowship for a few moments before turning it over to Marie. So what is the Emerging Leader Fellowship? It's a 2-year hands-on learning and leadership development opportunity for earlier career professionals in Philadelphia. Fellows work collaboratively with a host organization to lead a project that both advances the mission of that organization and also enhances fellows' skills and professional development. So you may be wondering, and clearly have an interest in your attendance today, but may be thinking, why might this be a good fit for my organization? Why would it make sense for my organization to apply to host a fellow? And the reasons that we think and that we've aggregated over the years from past host organizations are really threefold. First, and as I said previously, most importantly, this is an opportunity to address the gun violence epidemic that has gripped our city and taken the lives of nearly 390 Philadelphians in this year alone. Secondly, the fellowship also enables your organization to advance its work by bringing on young professionals who are really passionate and have deep expertise in their areas of focus. And third, and this is a reason that really resonates and is meaningful for Stoneleigh, you're helping to build the next generation of leaders in the city and in your field. You'll have the chance to help early career professionals gain leadership development experience and make critical connections that can launch their career. And here is a list of the 45 Emerging Leader Fellows to date that I mentioned. They're in descending order with our most recent cohort along the top row. And you may recognize many of them as your colleagues and collaborators in the city. So just a few notes about the mechanics of the fellowship. The following types of organizations are eligible to apply. The first category is academic institutions. So that can include research centers, academic research hospitals, and universities. The second category is nonprofit organizations. That includes service providers, advocacy organizations, child welfare agencies we've worked with in the past. And then the third broad category is, of course, public sector agencies. That includes local and state government, the school district, district attorney's office, the judiciary, just to name a few. As a reminder, this is a 2-year fellowship. We recruit for it every 2 years. And so this upcoming cohort would begin in October of 2023. A note about the fellows themselves. As I said before, this fellowship is really designed for early career professionals who are launching their careers. We do not have a specific education requirement. In the past, we have had a specific education requirement. We no longer do so, but we do expect that candidates have a certain degree of expertise and experience in their field. And that can be evidenced by their professional work experience, their academic studies, or I think very saliently, their personal lived experience. The fellowship award will go directly to the host organization. It includes funds for the fellow's salary, as well as benefits and taxes, and an administrative sort of overhead fee for the host organization. So beyond the fellowship award itself, what kind of support does Stoneleigh provide to fellows and host organizations? Each fellow is assigned a dedicated program officer who provides guidance and mentorship and meets with the fellow on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. We also offer fairly robust monthly programming for our fellowship cohort. That can include leadership sessions with Stoneleigh fellows and leaders in the field, communication skill building sessions, policy briefings, and advocacy training and exposure opportunities. And then, of course, we also extend opportunities to our emerging leaders to get to know the broader Stoneleigh network through convenings and networking opportunities and topic-specific sessions. And lastly, because we feel so strongly about this professional development and leadership development component of the program, we have invested in it and provide $2,500 per year of the fellowship for professional development, skill building, and opportunities for the fellow. And so finally, before I turn it over to Marie, I just wanted to spend a minute or two talking about the expectations that we have for host organizations. And foremost, I would say we really feel it's critical that host organizations have the capacity to appropriately supervise and also provide growth opportunities for the fellow. This is really not intended to be a staff position. This is a dedicated, sort of unique leadership opportunity and project-specific position that is embedded within your organization for a 2-year period. And so we required that the host organization identify a supervisor to oversee the fellow. That includes not just overseeing the work itself, but also serving as a mentor, holding the fellow accountable, meeting regularly with the fellow, and again, discussing those professional development and career growth goals that the fellow may have over the course of the 2 years. So with that, I will pause and just remind you to please feel free to submit any questions in the Q&A or the chat. Marie and I are happy to take them in real time. And again, we'll leave some time at the end. But with that, I would like to turn it over to Marie to again get into some of the specifics about this year's recruitment cycle and our focus on Philadelphia's gun violence epidemic. Marie?
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Good afternoon, everyone. As Anne-Marie mentioned, I'm Marie Williams, Deputy Director at the Stoneleigh Foundation. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the impetus for this request for letters. Then I'll walk you through the kinds of letters we hope to receive from applicants, a little bit about the application process, and then finally, a little about how we evaluate our proposals. Afterwards, as Anne-Marie mentioned, we'll open things up for questions. So in the past, Stoneleigh has solicited applications to improve, broadly speaking, youth serving systems, be it child welfare, juvenile justice, the school system, the education system, and so on. This request for letters differs in that the foundation is making a strategic investment toward addressing one of the most, if not the most, pressing issue in the city. So whereas in the past, our emerging leader cohorts, in building those cohorts, we've looked primarily to projects that propose systems change. In this instance, we're looking for impact on a specific issue, obviously the issue of gun violence. So the overarching question that you would be asking yourselves as applicants is how, if your project were successful, might it help address or reduce gun violence in Philadelphia? Another key difference in this process from those we've had in the past is that while in the past our broader focus resulted in an emerging leader fellow cohort working sometimes on disparate issues or with different systems, in this instance, we're looking to create a leadership cohort with complementary angles and approaches, but working with common purpose. What does that mean in practical terms? What types of projects are we looking for? It might be, for instance, a communications project that centers the voices of communities and individuals affected by gun violence. Or it could be a research project or organizing project, depending on how you look at it, that takes into account the motivations and maybe desistance to firearm ownership. Or it could be a research project that investigates regional variations to gun violence. And while we do have 2 slides here, I just want to emphasize that these specific projects are of interest to us, obviously, but this is not by any means an exhaustive list of the types of projects that we're welcoming. I'd also draw everybody's attention to that very first bulleted item, if you can go back 1 slide, Anne-Marie, that reads, center the perspectives and voices of communities and individuals. There might certainly be a project whose primary purpose is that bulleted item. But our hope and, well, not our hope, our expectation is that with every project that is proposed, there will be some mechanism or manner of taking into account the perspectives and voices of communities and individuals who have lived firsthand with gun violence. So ultimately, as I mentioned, what we're looking to do is create a well-rounded community of leaders and approaches focused on gun violence in Philadelphia. So now let's talk a little bit about the application process. First, I want to remind folks that while the inclination is to begin to think really big, detailed ideas, this round is just a request for letters. So it's essentially an abstract in letter format, not a full proposal. The application that I'm going to ask Anne-Marie to pull up, if you could. The internet never cooperates when we want it to.
Marie, hopefully, are you seeing that?
Not yet. There might be a little bit of a lag, but I will say while that's loading, that the due date for the abstract, the letter of inquiry, is January 13, 2023. It's currently open on the website. So if you were super prepared and just simply waiting for the Stoneleigh application to go live, it is currently live on our website, and you're certainly free not only to peruse what might be asked of you, as we're going to do here hopefully in a few moments, but to submit your application well before January of 2023. If you're an overachiever and want to spend your holidays actually holidaying. So Anne-Marie, what do you think? Should we just talk about it? Talk about the sections while that?
I think
Okay.
so.
All right. So we may not be able to see the web page, folks, but hopefully it will pop up at some point. But the application form is going to have these general sections. It's going to ask you about your organization. It will ask you for a problem statement about your organization. It's going to be hopefully only a couple of sentences. Please don't be exhaustive in your descriptions of your organization. Despite what's happening right now, the internet does work at the Stoneleigh Foundation, and we'll look you up. So tell us in a few sentences, the most salient points of your organization, about your organization. In the problem statement, this is where we oftentimes have challenges folks will be tempted to be truly exhaustive in defining the problem. We do not need you to do that. We will, in fact, limit the amount of space that you have on the online application for describing the problem. And when we talk about the problem at this phase, we definitely do not want you to describe the macro level problem of gun violence in Philadelphia. We are all painfully aware of what that is. Program officers and staff at Stoneleigh have researched it quite a bit ourselves in preparation for this process. So don't waste any of your word count telling us in particular how many people may have been injured or killed in the gun violence epidemic, unless that is going to be key to defining the very specific problem which your project seeks to address. For instance, the problem statement that we're hoping you will have in this section, if you were, for instance, to do the public voice project that we described a couple of slides ago, the problem statement there might be something along the lines of, in policy, practice, and research conversations about gun violence in Philadelphia, rarely do we speak to the people most affected by that problem. Rarely do we reach out to the communities most affected by that problem. My project or our project seeks to address this deficit in the following ways, would be your project description. So we want your specific problem statement, not the macro problem statement. So likewise, moving on to project description, just as I started to describe what the project might be to address a lack of voice among those most affected by the problem of gun violence, that's where we would want you to focus your project description. Talk about how your project is going to address this. Bear in mind that it is a 2-year fellowship, which means you want to come in somewhere between, we are going to end the gun violence epidemic in Philadelphia, not a realistic goal, and we're going to talk to 10 people on a block where 5 people were shot last year. You want to come in somewhere in the middle, right? Talking about how you might do outreach to the community, how you might amplify their voice, and what you will have at the end of your project period, which again is 2 years. In the qualifications of the ideal fellowship candidates section, we're looking for some marriage between the project description and the person that you hope to execute the project. So at this point, you will not, most of you have identified a specific individual that you hope will be your emerging leader fellow. But what you will undoubtedly have talked about internally is the type of person that you hope will become the emerging leader fellow. As Anne-Marie alluded to earlier, we don't have an educational requirement. And depending on the type of project, you may want to emphasize the lived experience of your proposed emerging leader fellow and de-emphasize their educational qualifications if they have them. For instance, the fact that someone has a master's degree may not be persuasive of whether or not that person will be a credible emissary to a community if you have a community-based project. So we urge you to think really deeply about whether or not the qualifications that you propose to us align with the project description and the problem statement. So phase 2 of the application process, that is the full proposal stage. We're not going to talk a lot about it today because it's frankly not, it's not relevant. We're only asking you at this stage to think about what your abstract, your letter of inquiry will look like. Once your abstracts have been completed, and they've been submitted, we've reviewed them, you will at some point after the new year, and obviously after January 13th, if you're successful, receive an invitation to submit a full proposal. Full proposal is standard. Quite frankly, if you've ever had, occasion to submit a proposal to a foundation, includes the usual components, cover letter. Detailed proposal would be a more sort of granular description of your project. Will give you a lot more than just a paragraph to describe it. Your project description. You'll have obviously a lot more room to do that. The timeline, super important. Usually people think of a timeline in a proposal as sort of, telling us when things are going to happen. We're definitely going to need you to tell us when things are going to happen. But one of the key things that we look at in this section is whether or not the project can reasonably be accomplished within a 2-year time frame. And if in the event you have a project that contemplates work beyond that 2-year timeline, we would expect in this section that you describe some plan for sustaining it beyond the Emerging Leader Fellow's tenure. Budget also standard. We're also inviting folks who get to this stage to be in conversation with us about every single component of this proposal. It's not necessarily a one and done. You go give it your best shot, you submit it, you cross your fingers. We invite and will make provisions for a conversation with a dedicated staff person to guide you through the proposal process, should you request that. I saw a question go up in the chat. Let me see if I can pull that up really quickly before I move on. So, can you give examples of past projects Stoneleigh Fellows have worked on? What constitutes a good project fit for a Stoneleigh Fellow? Anne-Marie, do you want to start on that and give me some time to gather my thoughts? We've had many good projects. I'm struggling to think of one that's more that's similar to what we're doing here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. I think I'll just say as a caveat up front, we've had a number of really tremendous projects and successful projects in the past. What makes this year a little bit different is our kind of laser focus on the theme and the issue of gun violence. So while I'll provide a few examples of the types of projects that we've invested in the past and those that have been successful, just note that this year is a little bit different because of the kind of focus area. But one that is really relevant is a project that focused on building coalitions and partnerships to move the needle on gun violence and youth impacted by gun violence. So we had an Emerging Leader Fellowship 2 years ago who worked with the Health Promotion Council to expand youth voices in gun violence prevention policy efforts in Pennsylvania. So really worked to develop a curriculum that was based on a model that the Health Promotion Council had developed related to an entirely different public health issue, but adapted it for gun violence and brought together a cohort of young people, sort of walked with them through that curriculum, and then also helped them engage in advocacy and policy efforts. So that would be kind of a great example of a youth engagement, organizing focused fellowship that happened to be aligned with this year's theme of gun violence. But other fellows in the past, they've employed advocacy strategies, including direct legal representation. A fellow who is an attorney worked with Temple School of Law to expand access to kinship care for child welfare involved families in Philadelphia. Also projects that have advanced new approaches to service delivery. So we had a fellow who worked with Philadelphia Fights YHEP Health Center, their youth-focused health center, to expand young people's access to health care. And then, of course, a number of research projects, including applied research projects, including one fellow who worked with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to study the needs of young parents to build better mental health supports in pediatrics. So, again, I'll just say, I think that gives hopefully an interesting array of different types of approaches and fellowship projects. And I think there's certainly lessons and insights to be gained from those prior investments. But this year, we are focused on sort of building that cohort of fellows who are all focused on gun violence, but are focused from different perspectives. So for instance, you may have a fellow who is doing an applied research project on sort of access to, barriers to firearm possession and ownership that might complement another emerging leader fellow who's working on elevating the voices of young people in communities that are deeply impacted by gun violence, that might complement another fellow who's working on a sort of advocacy or policy project. And again, excuse me, our hope is that that synergy of different approaches, all focused on the same topical area, will really strengthen the impact of this cohort, make an impact in the city, which is really our primary goal here, but also enable the fellows to sort of have a support network, knowing that there's 3, 4, 5 peers who they can go to and talk to about some of the challenges they're experiencing, some of the opportunities that they see for collaboration. So I hope that answers your question. Marie, feel free to jump in.
I'll just add to your very good answer around specific projects, but again, emphasizing that those projects that Anne-Marie described were by and large focused on changing the way that systems operate, or changing the way that affected populations interact with those systems, and vice versa, right? So this is a very different kind of focus. But to speak sort of more generally, as Anne-Marie was talking, I scribbled down a couple of, sort of broad criteria that we look at for emerging leader and frankly, all fellowship projects. So good projects should always be achievable, right? So early on, I sort of alluded to this, sort of grandiose, if just this one thing happened, we would end the gun violence epidemic in Philadelphia. I don't think anyone truly believes a single project can do that. And, it does you no favors if you make those kinds of claims. So make sure that the project and its goals are achievable, and that you're prepared to demonstrate the way in which it is achievable, right? And what the inputs would be to achieve that project. I think we also in general like projects to be relevant. Good news, we've done that part for you, right? So there is nothing more relevant to civic life in Philadelphia today than the gun violence epidemic. We also like, if possible, for the projects to be demonstrably sustainable beyond the fellowship. Not oftentimes, actually fairly seldom, a proposal will be for something that will be done by the term of the fellowship, and no more work need be done after the fellowship. For instance, there may be a policy change or a practice that needs to be changed in a system. And if that were to happen, then the fellow could declare victory and go home, and it's left to others to implement that new practice or policy. If that's not the case, then having sustainability be one of your barometers is really smart when thinking about your project. If after 2 years we no longer have a fellow, this work could be sustained in the following ways. Another criterion would be that it's collaborative. Stoneleigh has always emphasized, whenever possible, having our fellows work with other stakeholders, not always with systems, but with other stakeholders, because a lot of this work is like pushing a boulder up a hill. We don't think that any one organization or person can do that alone. And finally, but definitely not the least important, we want every fellowship to have leadership development and learning potential for the fellow. Our fellowships always have 2 goals. One would be the successful implementation or launching of the project. The second goal will be the development of the leadership of the fellow and providing them with the learning that enables them to be a leader in the field. in the future. In the field, in this case, does not mean that they need to go on to be a leader in gun violence. They could be a leader communications wise, organizing, research, whatever the case may be. But those are the things that come to mind for me when thinking about what constitutes a good project. I think that's a pretty good segue actually into how we evaluate our proposals. I see we might not have an extraordinary amount of time, so I'm going to rush through this a tiny bit and say first that this is the first time, at least that I can remember, I've been with Stoneleigh 6 or so years, that I can remember where we've been completely transparent about how our proposals and our letters of inquiry are evaluated. We think that's really, really important to do so that we can invite new partners to the table, have new organizations funded by Stoneleigh, new individuals elevated to leadership by giving them resources to enable that to happen. I'm hoping, because I don't have it in front of me. Okay, well, this is actually good enough. I was thinking we would look at the rubric itself, but we actually don't need to. So these are the sections of the evaluation rubric. The rubric itself, the complete rubric, is also on the website, as is the application. We're going to first look at the problem statement and urgency. I gave you kind of a hint early on as to what a good problem statement would look like in this case. So not the macro level problem of gun violence across the United States, the Commonwealth, or even the city of Philadelphia, unless that is the problem you propose to solve. I doubt anyone's going to be proposing to solve the problem at a macro level. You should not then dedicate your problem statement to describing that. You should describe the specific problem that your project is targeting. Project design. One of the things that is really important to us in this section is seeing that the applicant or the proposal has laid out a logical progression of activities for the Stoneleigh Fellow. So if it's an organizing project, phase 1 should probably not just say convene focus groups of 200. We're going to want to know where you're going to find the 200 people, who the 200 people are, broadly speaking, what communities the 200 people come from, why you chose those communities, that kind of thing, right? So we're looking for specificity. We're looking for, logic in terms of progression. We're looking for awareness of the social and political and the practical context in which the project will be implemented. So if you're doing community work, understand community work. If you don't have that capacity to understand community work, from where will you derive that capacity? You have consultants, will you have stakeholders who are partners, that kind of thing. We're really tight around the project design. Organizational capacity. We're looking now to partner with smaller, more community-based organizations than we have in the past, not only small and community-based organizations, but we're hoping, frankly, to enlarge or tent a little bit and make a little bit more robust or partnerships with folks in the community. So this organizational capacity piece, we just want to know about your the size of the organization, the ability to supervise a Stoneleigh Fellow, as Anne-Marie alluded to earlier. Who's that person going to be reporting to day to day? And it may even be practical things like, do you have a location? Do you have a location where they might have a desk? Do they have internet connectivity? Do they have the capacity to communicate with other members of staff? Does the organization understand or have a reputation for working in the sort of sphere of influence where this work will take place? That kind of. And again, that's a great segue to mission alignment. If an organization is looking to do a communications project, it would not eliminate them from consideration, but it certainly would make us look a little bit more closely if they have, for instance, no experience whatsoever creating public campaigns or communications and outreach types of projects, if this is something that vastly diverges from the mission of the organization, you'll want to be careful to explain why. Why does it make sense for you to be funded in this type of work? And again, learning potential, as I alluded to. Again, the project is incredibly important. The issue of gun violence is incredibly important. So, you know, we're looking for serious comers, right? So folks who really want to have an impact on the gun violence epidemic in a meaningful and hopefully lasting way. But we also want to make sure that the organizations that apply are prepared and poised to create learning opportunities for the Stoneleigh Fellow. This young person, or not so young person, but we want this person after their Stoneleigh Fellowship to have gained new skills, new networks, new clarity about their career path, and new opportunities to further it beyond the term of their fellowship. So with that, I think we're gonna open it up for questions that you may have.
Thanks, Marie. Yes, I encourage anyone to add a question. I think we had one come through on the chat that we indicated a space limit for the problem statement, asking what that space limit is. So there's two parts here. One, you'll see, let me step back and just say, you will find the application at stoneleighfoundation.org. Right on the home page, there are multiple links directly to the application page. And as Marie explained, the first part of this application is twofold. There's an application form that asks some basic questions about your organization, about the sort of population of focus, the issue at focus, and just some tactical questions about you as a host organization and your capacity to host an Emerging Leader Fellow. On that form, we ask for a description of your organization's mission. There's a 100-character limit on that, and then a 1-sentence description of your project. However, the second part of the application, so you'll see at the bottom of that page, is an invitation to submit a project summary. And that gives you a little bit more space. We're asking that project summary, which includes those 4 sections about the mission of your organization, the problem statement, the project description, and your ideal fellowship candidate, to be no more than 2 pages, 12-point font. So you have a little space to expound upon the problem and the project and what you're looking for. So with that, I'll pause and just see if we have any other questions come through. And if not, I'll leave you with a few specific next steps. And just thank you so much again today for joining us, for your interest. I'd just like to say, and I didn't say up front, but Stoneleigh is really, we're excited isn't exactly the right word, but we're really interested in being able to dedicate this entire cohort of emerging leaders, so up to 5 or 6 fellows, to focus exclusively on what we see as the most critical issue facing our city right now. And this is the first time that we've done this, that we've kind of put out a call for fellows all focused on the same issue. And we've consulted with quite a few folks inside and outside of our network to make sure that we're structuring this in a way that's valuable for the city, that's valuable for prospective fellows, and that's valuable for potential host organizations. So we really do hope that this presentation has answered some of those questions and given you some food for thought about what we're hoping for. And of course, we're open to you as experts letting us know what you think are the most salient issues related to this challenge. So not seeing any questions, but feel free to add them in the next minute or so. I'll just wrap up with a few quick reminders and next steps. So as I said, the application is currently open and we are accepting applications through January the 13th, so just after the new year. You will find the application at stoneleightfoundation.org. And again, at this phase, we are inviting the submission of an application form and a 2-page project summary. If any questions come up for you during this process between now and January 13th, please feel free to reach out to us. You have Marie's information on the screen here, and you have my information from earlier today. But of course, please feel free to reach out to the foundation. We're happy to answer questions and sort of talk through with you some ideas that you might have, even if they're in a nascent stage. We will be holding a subsequent information session in 2 weeks on October the 26th at 10 a.m. If any of your colleagues would like to join us, or if there are other peers at other organizations that you think might be a good fit for this opportunity, please feel free to let them know. We will be sending out a follow-up email with the fellowship details and the timeline that we discussed today, as well as a link to the application form and the recording of today's session. And a final reminder that we, in addition to this Emerging Leader Fellowship, which operates on a 2-year cycle and has a very sort of bounded specific time frame, we're always recruiting for our Stoneleigh Fellowship, which we accept applications on a rolling basis. And as a reminder, that's an opportunity for mid to senior career professionals. Those ideas come directly from an individual, not necessarily a host organization. Currently, we have 2 Stoneleigh Fellows who are focused on the issue of gun violence, coming at it from a couple of different perspectives. But we're again growing this portfolio given the importance of this issue in the city. And so we invite proposals for Stoneleigh Fellowships on the issue of gun violence or on other issues that are relevant to our mission and our focus. So I'll pause there, and I see that we have one more comment. Thank you, Arunde, for that comment. We're looking forward to this investment, hopefully, in a number of really powerful projects. So thank you so much again for your time today, for your commitment to this issue, and we hope to hear from you in the coming months.
Thanks, everyone.